one with every aspect of creation, unlimited in power and in peace. You know, our first unity principle, you know, God is, there is only one presence and one power as the universe and as my life. God the good omnipotence. The deal is, if we live that principle, we wouldn't need the other four. The mere fact that we need to be reminded of that principle tells us we're already a little ways away from the truth. Now, the good news is that the unity principles and all these spiritual principles were written down for those of us who are on the path. Okay, we're getting there. And so I want you to think now of the unity principles 2 through 5 as the path to really realizing and living the first principle, which is all there really is. Now, today's topic is really the second unity principle, I am. Now, the sad thing about the second unity principle is that it's actually a little hazardous, even dangerous, as it is understood and applied by about 99.9% of our population. See, this isn't the spiritual way that people hear it and apply it. We have lots of personality examples of individuals who said, I'm God. And we obviously know some of the things that come up from that. So God is not some form of superego, you know, a better, stronger version of me. Yeah, I know. You know, we're expressions of God energy. We're approximations, if you will, of that God energy. Mostly we're pale imitations of that God energy. See, the tricky part is, long as there is me and God, we aren't God. Until there is no I in my life, in my experience, I am not God, and God is not me. The potential's there. We're all made of the same old God stuff. And God can work through us and as us when we let Him. As long as we're identifying with a body, I volunteer, I admit it. As long as we're identifying with a body, we cannot see or know God, really, truly. So if there's anything I can say with certainty, is that God is not an illusion. And probably close second, everything that I perceive with my human eyes is an illusion. Now, you've heard it before, the world is all an illusion. Well, it's not an illusion because it's not real in our experience. It's actually an illusion because it is real in our experience. And our experience keeps changing. Ever notice that? The same thing in different circumstances can be either good or bad. Can be a blessing or a curse. Can be exactly what we want or the last thing we want, depending on the circumstance. There is no reality in that. So I went to the dictionary, my favorite book. I looked at the definition of an illusion. First definition, anything that seems to be something that it is not. Second, a belief in something that is not, in fact, true. And Robert's definition is an inaccurate interpretation of something that is true. All of those are illusion. Paramahansa Yogananda, who's the founder of Self-Realization Fellowship, he defined ego as the soul identified with the body. See, if we're busy identifying ourselves with our bodies, then we cannot see or know our true nature. So we only partially perceive the truth of God, and that's because of our own self-imposed blindness. By the way, that self-imposed blindness comes from our perceived separation, which basically is a result of our identification with the body. You've heard it before. I'm going to say it the obvious. God cannot be seen or known out there. Essentially, this God stuff is an inside job. However, caveat. I'm kind of challenging us to think a little differently and to recognize the limitations of our thinking. It's not a job inside this limited, separate human body. I don't look for God in here. My job is to expand my sense of self until it includes everything. And then I know God within. See, we tend to look at the world from the body's perspective. And I'm really challenging us to begin to look at the world from God's perspective. Now, I have this funny little yellow book up here. Thick yellow book up here. I never saw this book before in my life. By a guy named Sri Nisargadatta. I'll say that a couple times until I get it right. The title of the book is I Am That. And it says on here, a modern spiritual classic. It was written in the 1970s. Ira, bless his heart, handed this to me a couple of weeks ago. And we had a gentleman who came and donated a lot of books to our lending library, and on top of the pile was another one of these.
Wow. That's cool.
All right? It's in our lending library. There will be 2 copies after service. I'll put that over there as well, if you're interested.
Wow.
It's a very revealing book. The title again is I Am That. What he says in there, he says, there's only one mistake you are making. You take the inner for the outer, and the outer for the inner. What is in you, you take to be outside. What is outside, you take to be in you. The mind and feelings are external, but you take them to be intimate. You believe the world to be objective, while it is entirely a projection of your psyche. There's a lot of metaphors about, enlightenment, climbing the mountaintop, and all of that kind of stuff. So what I want to say is, you get the real view from the mountaintop not by climbing up the path and getting to the mountaintop, but by, again, expanding your sense of self to include the entire mountain. So I'm going to offer the possibility that we look at enlightenment not as an extending line from here to there, but as an expanding circle. Swami Kriyananda, who recently passed, bless his heart, a lot of good things. He founded the Ananda community up in Northern California here. He said, ego consciousness is the final limitation. It lingers on after every other bond has been severed. Chains, though of gold, still bind. To be happy is not in itself binding, of course. What binds one is the thought, I. Ego binds to the degree that it separates one from others. Now, there's a lot of talk and energy and effort about making this world a better place. There are some problems with making this world a better place, believe it or not. I mean, I could ask the question that's a little pushy here, but what good does it do to improve an illusion? Yeah. I mean, I'd rather focus on waking up. There's a lot of talk about, life as a school. So think back to school. Would you really want to be in school, elementary or high school, and be so busy fixing it up like you're going to live there forever? Or you just want to get an education, graduate, and get on with your life? So fixing up the world, improving the conditions, only has value if we use those improved conditions to learn more about the truth of who we are. See, it's great to give ourselves conditions in which we are more receptive, more open, more knowing, more expansive, but not for the purpose of improving the world and making a happier illusion. Some spiritual people, by the way, they grow spiritually, and then they get so comfortable that they blow the opportunity they've created for themselves. They get complacent, and they forget they were here to wake up. So rather than working on the effect, I'm suggesting we need to work on the cause. We need to change our lives. We need to change our identification with our body, with things, with the world. See, when we change what we're projecting onto the world, because it's all an inside job, we actually change the world that we're experiencing. So in the scripture today, I am was given as the name for God. And it's actually a name specifically for manifesting God, the manifest God. So I am is actually a creative, manifesting principle. So what are you creating when you say, I'm tired, I'm sick, I'm broke? Or what kind of a world are you creating when you say, they're wrong, they're bad, you're ugly? Instead of saying those things, let's reframe our self-identification so that it describes the illusion. Now, this is a mind game, but since the mind runs a lot of this physical world show, kind of like your car. Oh, my body's out of gas. Oh, my body needs a tune-up. Oops, bender, bender. Don't own it. Don't self-define by your words.
Yes.
There's a story. This guy goes off in search of a holy man. He finally finds him. And the holy man says, "Who are you?" And the man gives his name. And the holy man says, "Who are you?" And the man says, "Well, I graduated from here, and I did that, and I do this for a living." "Well, who are you?" "My parents were this, and my lineage is that." And he says, finally, the holy man looks at him and he says, "You know, since you really don't know who you are, it's probably a good thing you came here." So the story goes on and time progresses, and at some point in time, the man realizes, wow, I don't really know who I am. And he says, that which changes cannot be what I am. I'm something within that remains unchanged, that simply observes the change. So now he goes back to the holy man and he says, I know who I am, but there are no words with which to describe it. And the holy man says, ah, now that words fail you, we have much to communicate.
Whoa.
Back to my friend Sri Nisargadatta. And that's a spiritual practice in itself. What he says also in this book is, discover all that you are not. Body, feelings, thoughts, time, space, this or that. Nothing concrete or abstract which you perceive can be you. The very act of perceiving shows that you are not what you perceive. You got to work on these things. I'm still working on it. You know, all this stuff goes on automatically, unconsciously. It's just part of the world. We don't think about it. But if you really look at it, we're either accidentally or sometimes deliberately mistaking who we are, misidentifying ourselves, pretending to be someone or something that we're really not. Mostly, by the way, it's because we confuse the worldly with the spiritual. So here's a suggestion. Since it's going on all the time anyway, let's bring this whole process to consciousness. And I like to use one of Betty Lou's famous processes. So sometime when you have a little space and time and you're not going to be distracted, you want to commit to knowing a little more about yourself, get a pen, get a piece of paper, write down on the top of the paper, who do I pretend to be? And then write down every answer that comes to mind. Who do I pretend to be? A human being. Who do I pretend to be? A minister. Who do I pretend to be? A father. Who do I pretend to be? A nice guy. Who do I pretend to be? Limited, little, lacking. Who do I pretend to be? A hero. Write them all down. When you've had enough of that, get a clean sheet of paper. On top of that, write, who am I really? And write down everything you can think of. A holy man. I'm unlimited. Do this until you get clear that who you really are is your own unique expression of love in the world. And that is the true gift of I am.